that should have been decisive, Ketty. But then crazy things started to happen right in this position. It is time for your round 6 rapid recap. And there was really no question, Ketty, about the game that we wanted to choose today. It is an absolutely epic battle between Andre Esipenko and Hikaru Nakamura. Now, at the start of the game, Andre was a half point behind Hikaru, so he had to win in order to get to the top of his group and qualify. So lots of very high stakes game. Let's dive into it. And it started as an Italian. Andre avoiding Hikaru's Berlin, not really a surprise, Ketty. The first real surprise came on the 5th move.
Yes, when he played here after knight f6, a4, and he didn't went to the very main and deep line.
Yeah, he refrains from going c3, at least for a while. He starts by sort of pushing his pawn to a5, an interesting, relatively fresh approach. Only now does he go c3. So he makes some usual Italian moves, h3, h6, bishop e3 is normal. And rook e8, we were a little bit iffy about this move. It's possible that Hikaru just missed or underestimated Andre's next move, but this is where the problems kind of began. It appears that bishop takes e3, and then maybe getting this knight from e7 to g6 was the way to preserve equality. But Ketty, after rook e8, Andre makes a relatively straightforward and very nasty move.
It is queen b3. This queen and the bishop pair up on this diagonal and attack f7 pawn. And now if you get bishop now on e6, b7 pawn will be hanging and the knight on c6 will be also hanging. However, we considered that this was the line that Hikaru should choose right now. Black has d5 move and rook from e6 guards the knight on c6, and Black had very good position here to keep the game go, as the queen on b7 is a bit stuck there.
Yeah, so this would have given Black good compensation, but for whatever reason, Hikaru not going for that, instead going for queen e7, Andre developing his knight. Rook b8 was now necessary in order to defend the pawn, but this gives Andre the chance to take and strike at the center with d4. And it's quite clear already that White is quite a bit better. He's got all of the good stuff in. Black still hasn't developed his bishop. Hikaru really, really passive here. He has to spend a tempo getting his knight back, and Andre getting his rook involved and making a very impressive decision here, Ketty. I think he goes d5, which initially, at least I was suspicious about, but then I realized his idea is to go back to f1 and just send these pawns down the queen side, whereas Hikaru doesn't really have any play on the other side of the board.
Yeah, and it was very nicely played here by Andre, as he pushed c4 next move, and after knight g5, queen e3, and look at that knight on a7, that's hanging, and Black has to trade this knight first and to play knight c8, which is so passive. Look at this position. White has so much space on the queen side, and Black has really bad looking pieces on the c8 and b8.
And being as passive as he was, Hikaru desperately trying to get some life on the other side of the board. And Andre would give him a chance. So queen f6, here Andre decides to trade on f5, and using tactics, using the fact that rook on e8 is undefended, he gets his knight onto d4 and prepares to put it on e6. Knight e6 here was probably the best move. It would have preserved a big advantage, but Andre plays the move f4. He puts more pressure on e5, and this gave Hikaru a wonderful opportunity. There was this crazy move, knight b6. The point of this move is that it attacks the c4 pawn, but doesn't it just blunder a knight? Well, no, after e takes d4, the secondary point is revealed. The rooks are now connected. After queen d4 cb, it appears that the worst is behind Black. So this was a big opportunity missed by Hikaru after f4. However, this was far from the end of the adventure. Hikaru instead, Ketty, going for this very complicating move c6. But this is a big mistake, after which Andre took over the game.
Yeah, and Andre here took e5 pawn, f takes e5. Hikaru had to take pawn on d5, and look at this, e6, attacking the queen, and after queen goes away, instead of c takes d5 move, Andre goes rook f1, and why not c takes d5? Because now knight comes on e7, targets d5, and after queen b3, now queen can play on g5, on h5, and Black eventually gets this pawn on d5 and breathes in this position. But instead of this, Andre gave no chance to Hikaru to develop his knight and played rook f1 with very interesting idea, Daniel.
Yeah, he just kind of leaves the pawn on c4. The engine didn't like this move, but it was a very good practical. I maintain that it was a very good practical attempt. It's also possible that c5 here would have been even stronger, but in any case, so Hikaru goes 97. Andre says, take my pawn on c4. I don't care about that. What he does care about is getting his rooks as active as possible. And his main plan is to lift this other rook up to g3 and simply crash through on g7. But in practice, it wasn't that simple. Hikaru steps aside to h8. And now what should have been a decisive mistake by Hikaru. The move here was knight d5, only move to keep black in the game. This dislodges the queen from e3, and it gives black the e4 square for his queen, so that rook g3 is no longer with tempo, and black has the tempo to defend the g8, the g7 pawn. But Hikaru instead going for knight c6, trying to get this knight off of d4, and allowing Andre, after the trade of knights, to get this pawn fully entrenched on e7. And this is the pawn, combined with the threats against black's king, that should have been decisive, Ketty. But then crazy things started to happen right in this position.
Yes, here Esipenko went to rook g3, which is a bit inaccuracy. Instead, he could take the pawn on c4, which gives Hikaru less and less chances to survive. But yeah, instead of this, rook g3, now black has a chance to guard c4 pawn, and after rook e3, queen retreat back on g6, and now in this line, after queen captures c4, black had moved rook e8.
Yeah, rook e8, d5. So this is less clear, but Andre should have still taken on c4. This is still completely winning. But instead, he gets impatient. He goes rook f8, trying to promote the pawn. Hikaru gets his rook to e8 just in time. And the problem is that the trade of rooks is squarely in black's favor. Why is it in black's favor? Because with only one rook on the board, that rook has to essentially remain on e3 in order to defend the e-pawn. If you have two rooks, you can divide labor. One rook can defend e7. The other rook can focus on checkmating the king. So after rook f8, rook e8, Andre ends up taking g8. Hikaru takes with the king, very important move. That allows him to play queen f7. And at this point, the win is already very, very complicated. We thought that queen e6 might be the last objective chance to win the game, but it's an incredibly hard move to find. Andre instead transitioning the game into a queen endgame, which, due to the weakness of white's king, Ketty, turns out most probably to be drawn.
Yes, and black went for b4 pawn first. Black captured that pawn to avoid potentially white have a connected pass pawn. And then here black got this queen just blocking from a7 square.
Yep, there it is. He gives a check first to Hikaru, just inducing g3, just so the king is a little weaker. Then queen d4, and just in time, the queen flies back to a7, stopping further progress of the pawn. And there's a simple reason why this is a draw. In order to win the game, white has to get the queen to b7. That's the only way to dislodge black's queen. But if you try to get the queen even close to b7, black is immediately going to swoop in with his queen and deliver a straightforward perpetual check. The board is too wide open to allow white to defend against that. And Andre tried after queen a7. He went h4. He tried to create some luft. He set a trap, which Hikaru didn't fall into. Queen d4 is a very nice move. And after moving around for several moves back and forth, Andre sort of allows the forced drawing sequence. Queen d7, queen e4, maybe queen d3 was a final opportunity to preserve some minor chances, but Andre going queen e4, and Ketty Hikaru with excellent calculation here to force the draw, starting with the move d3.
d3, and after queen b7, he withdraws the queen back on d8. a7 is met by d2, and they are queening at the same time, where white has nothing to fight for. It's just a draw.
It's just a draw. There's no chances. You have to trade queens or you'll lose. And yeah, this move, queen d8, very, very important move. If you take on b7, you allow white to promote with check. So what an unbelievable defensive effort by Hikaru Nakamura, who was dead in the water. We were shoveling dirt on him, but you cannot shovel dirt on Hikaru Nakamura as he draws a crucial game and advances to the next stage. And this was your round 6 rapid recap. Ketty, oh, what a day. Long day, fun day, and a day that really gained steam as the hours went by.
I agree with that. And here we have two people getting up from the group, and this is Hikaru Nakamura. He just needed to draw against Esipenko because Esipenko was his rival in this group, and he managed. We just saw the game that ended in a draw. And we also have Aronian, who ended the game so early today against Dubov, and they played draw. However, we do have two tiebreaks tomorrow. In Group B, we're going to have Wojtaszek against Roberts. And in Group D, we're going to have Vasily against Dominguez.